Mr. Speaker, engrossed Senate Bill 2305, introduced by Senators Berry and other House and Senate sponsors. Engrossed Senate Bill 2305 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact subsection 1 of section 14-02.1-04 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to limitations on physicians and abortion facilities. Mr. Speaker, this has a fiscal note prepared on February 5th, 2013. The analysis indicates there is a general fund expenditure of $300,000 and an appropriation of the same. Mr. Speaker, your Human Services Committee recommends due pass on Senate Bill 2305 by a vote of 11 yeas, 2 nays, 0 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Leaning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of this Assembly, your Committee on Human Services recommends a due pass on Senate Bill 2305. This bill deals with the health and safety of the women having abortions. It requires the physician performing the abortion to be licensed in North Dakota and also have admitting privileges to a nearby hospital. There is also a requirement to have someone trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation present at the abortion facility during the abortion procedure. As with any medical procedure, complications do occur, and I would certainly think a woman undergoing a procedure would want as many safety precautions in place as possible. Should any problems arise during an abortion procedure, the requirements of this bill will ensure that the physician is well qualified to address the problems and also to expedite any hospitalization needs. Undergoing an abortion procedure is understandably an extremely stressful time for the woman, and she has a right to know that everything possible has been put in place to protect her health. Mr. Speaker and members of this Assembly, this bill will help protect those women in the instances of complications during an abortion procedure, and your Committee on Human Services recommends a due pass on Senate Bill 2305 by a vote of 11-2. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the bill carrier yield to a question?
Representative Silbernagel, Representative Leaning, would you yield to a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I will.
Representative Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Lady, did your committee look at other physicians or outpatient procedures that require admitting procedures, hospital admission procedures?
Representative Leaning.
We did not look at others. There aren't that many surgical procedures that are performed outside of a hospital, but no, we did not look at other procedures.
May I continue?
You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Laney, did you look at the rate of hospitalizations as a result of abortions, and did you look at the numbers that directly resulted from the clinic that's currently practicing?
Representative Leaning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We did have some testimony regarding the percentages of complications that took place. However, they did not apply to the North Dakota facility. They were nationwide statistics.
May I continue? So you had no local information?
Representative Leaning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, we did not. A lot of that information is not even reported, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Overson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, in committee we were presented with statistics intended to support the purpose of this bill. We were told this bill is meant to protect the health of women who may undergo an abortion procedure. Basically, we were told about the dangers of abortion and complications that may result. However, when I asked for references to support these statistics, I was given an article that talked not only about abortion, but also tied those statistics in with those of miscarriages. That is to say that pregnancies and potentially naturally occurring miscarriages present with just as many, if not more, complications than any abortion procedure. However, we are not asking that those performing birthing procedures have admitting privileges to any hospital. That may be a more prudent and logical piece of legislation. Unfortunately, that is not the bill we are dealing with today. This bill will jeopardize the practice of a safe existing medical practice in our state. The reality is that less than 1% of U.S. abortion patients experience a major complication and the risk of death, and the risk of death associated with abortion is 10 times as low as that associated with childbirth. To make that clear, the risk of death associated with abortion is 10 times as low as that associated with childbirth. It is more dangerous simply to be pregnant than it is to undergo an abortion procedure. Under the terms presented in this bill, there are only 2 hospitals in the state at which the providers at this clinic could obtain privileges in order to comply. One of those hospitals in Fargo requires that any physician who wants to maintain privileges must admit at least 10 patients per year. No provider at the clinic would meet this standard because in the last 10 years, there has been only 1 patient that needed to be transported from the clinic to the hospital, only 1 in 10 years. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, we are dealing with an unnecessary bill that places an unprecedented requirement of physician regulations that will not provide any additional safety to the women we are talking about. Credentialing is a costly and time-consuming practice and is intended to screen physicians that, in fact, intend to practice within a hospital. This threatens to undermine the integrity of the credentialing system. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, I urge you to vote no on 2305. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, I'm quite reluctant to rise and speak, but I feel that we all need to vote with as much accurate information as possible, and I just wanted to clarify that a great number of surgical procedures are performed outside of the hospital. I myself have performed hundreds and hundreds of these procedures, and I am not required to have hospital privileges, so this will be a new arena for the government in regulating physicians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Strinden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, the North Dakota Medical Association has taken a stance against SB 2305, saying that it is an abuse of the credentialing system that does not deserve to become law. It will also provide a precedent that threatens to undermine the credibility of the credentialing system itself, which would be of no good for patients and providers in general. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Representative Grandy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. There are a number of physicians that do have credentialing privileges that do surgeries. It is not a required piece at this time with those physicians, such as when my son had shoulder surgery. I do know that his physician had the credentialing to take him to a hospital if something would have arose. So those things are done. The reason why this is different is that the Supreme Court said that the states are to look at the health and safety of the mothers. This is a way that we can address this issue, and it is a very important piece to the protection of these women in their right to know and their right to safety in these procedures. The statistics aren't necessarily going to be pertinent at this time because of the way they are being kept track of from this clinic, and so this will be a good piece, a nice tool for us to be able to see how these procedures are being taken care of. I do ask for a green vote. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Representative M. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Becker yield to a question?
Representative Becker, would you yield to a question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Representative Becker. If when you perform these surgical procedures at a clinic and there were complications that required that person to go to the hospital, would they be safer if you had admitting privileges at that hospital than if you did not?
Representative Becker.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Nelson, no, I don't believe they would be safer. If the complication arose while I was performing an outpatient procedure, the ambulance would be called, they would be taken to the emergency room. A determination of the type of complication would be made, and an admitting physician who would have expertise in the area of that complication would be chosen as the admitting physician.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration Senate Bill 2305. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 58 yea, 34 nay, 2 absent, not voting. Senate Bill 2305 is declared passed. Continuing on the 14th order of business, the House has before it